Aloha kako. This is Lili Kalakame Eleiwa in part 3 of our temple overview. I'm starting with slide 54. And I'm sorry that we have to cut the PowerPoint into different videos. It's just that the pictures are too large to put all into one video, and I'm sorry I haven't figured out the technology for that yet. However, here we go. This is slide number 54. I'm going to continue talking about the Luakini, which we saw teaches us about Ea, or sovereignty. You actually offer a human sacrifice, which, as we know, is only a male sacrifices are warranted, to get that kind of political power. But how can we tell? What is a Luakini? What does it look like? Is it different from other temples? Where are they? What do we know from the historical record? So there's some very famous Luakini. Some are on Hawaii Island, some are on Maui, some are on Oahu. In fact, we find them on every island. But I only have photographs for the following ones. So we're going to look, or drawings, some of them are just drawings, and we're going to look at those temples and see what's interesting and different about them. The first one we'll start with is Pu'ukohola in Kohala, Hawaii. So if we look at Hawaii Island, we see that it's divided into 6 moku districts with the mountains in the middle: Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, Hualalai. Here's another map that's a little bit easier to see the districts. Now, each of those 6 major districts will have many ahupua'a, and I think something like 400 ahupua'a on Hawaii Island. Maybe it's more than that. It's quite a few. But each district, each moku district, as we see, starting with, say, Hilo, we go to Puna, Ka'u, Kona, Kohala, Hamakua, before we come back to Hilo. Those districts would each have a Luakini temple in them. And so we're going to look at a few of them. We're going to go to Kohala, to Pu'ukohola Heiau. And here, if you got a map, this is where it is, and you can drive up to it, and there's a park there, and you can go and study it. And since many of you haven't been there, I just want to take you on a little tour of Pu'ukohola. So here's the visitor center. It's called the National Historic Site. And here's a view of Pu'ukohola Heiau from the ocean. Now, you should know that down in the ocean, kind of near where that canoe is in the foreground of this photograph, is another temple that's for sharks. It's actually in the water. And it's a place where people would get offerings to sharks, and sharks would come to congregate. So there's a kind of a sanctity of this area from the mountain all the way down into the ocean. Now, Pu'u, as you know, means a hill. And Kohala refers to a whale. So Pu'ukohola is actually the hill of the whale, and it represents that sovereignty power, that ea of Kanaloa, because the Kohola is a body form of Kanaloa. You should also know that this temple was refurbished by Kamehameha I in before in his about 17 in the 1790s, about 1792 I think it was. And the prediction was that if he would rebuild his temple, Pu'ukohola, that actually he would be able to unite the islands without a scratch to his skin. That the power of Kanaloa would give him the power to unite the islands. As you also look at this photograph, in the foreground looks like there's a big wall. That's actually another temple. That's the female temple, Mailikini. So for those of us who go to do ceremony there at Pu'ukohola, and Kumu Lake used to take a lot of us there, the women would go to the one below and would do ceremonies at Mailikini, while the men would do ceremonies up on top at Pu'ukohola. Here's another view of Pu'ukohola. These are photographs I've actually taken. This is how massive the walls are. It really does look like a huge 2-story structure, and kind of looks like a whale. You know, the Kohala is a humpback whale. Kind of looks like a humpback. Here's a view from up at Pu'ukohola looking down at the ocean, and you can see that there's another wall built in more recent times. This is part of the Kawaihae Harbor. But right at the bottom of this shoreline, near the land is where the place is for the sharks, and it's actually called Perikani. Here's another view of Pu'ukohala, kind of a close-up of how that wall turns. There's a sharp turn in the wall. And there's also some stone structures that come away from the temple as if to demarcate the areas down below. Yeah. Notice that here we have in the right-hand corner of this photograph, we have an altar that sometimes people build when they want to leave offerings. They didn't put it on the temple. This would have been very similar to what the prayer tower looked like on the temple. It would have been covered with white kapa. But nowadays, it's left as kind of a makeshift altar to leave ho'okupu or offerings. Here's a drawing by Herb Kane of what Pu'ukohola might have looked like in ancient times, with a prayer tower kind of where the moon is on that side. And that actually would have been the south end of the temple, because this is a temple that faces west. And I'd like you to note that in this temple drawing, there are many different platforms, and that is actually accurate. There are many different platforms, different sized ili or rocks and pebbles on the temple to show what would have been placed where. Now, I'd like you to have a look at this map that comes from the visitor center. If you look right in the middle at that red drawing, there's Pu'ukohola Heiau, and actually the wall on the right-hand side is 0 degrees north wall. This temple has one wall that you can measure with a compass that's 0 degrees north. And that seems to be true of Luakini temples in Hawaii. They have one wall measuring 0 degrees north. Now, Mailikini, which is a little bit further down, or more Makai of Pu'ukohola, more rectangular, it's also 0 degrees north. So it doesn't mean just because there's 0 north that it is actually a Luakini, but Luakini might have that feature. They might have one wall 0 degrees north, not diagonal, not like the whole Luai, but north-south, definitely north-south. Okay, now we can go to another heiau. This one is called Wahaula. See where the arrow is pointing, and it's actually in the area of Puna, or it was. It's still there, but Tutupele has taken her lava flow and covered the site, so it is no longer available to see. And this also was a 0 degree north wall temple, Wahaula Heiau in Puna. Now, that's kind of interesting because Wahaula was one of the first temples that was built by the priest Pa'ao who came from Raiatea. We'll hear more about him later on in the class, but some of the temples we'll see today out of Raiatea also are 0 north. Okay, let's go to Maui. This is my favorite place because my family's from Maui. And notice that the kingdom of Maui included Lanai and Kaho'olawe, so it's the middle kingdom. Sometimes Molokai, sometimes not. Here's a modern map of Maui, and of course you could land in Kahului Airport right in the middle of the island. Then you're going to take the road all the way to Hana, and along the way to Hana you will stop at a park just outside of Hana, and that park is in Ko'olau. It's where we see the temple, really massive temple there, called Pi'ilani Hale. It's said to be in Hana, but it's actually, I think, in Ko'olau, or it's right on the border. I have to let the experts tell me more about that. But this is an aerial view. See how big it is from above? We took this while flying in a plane over this area. So let's take a look a little bit closer at this Pi'ilani Hale. Now, Pi'ilani was a great chief of Maui. Hale is the name of the house of this area. Pi'ilani Hale, the house of Pi'ilani, and it was actually built by his son Kiha a Pi'ilani, who was born on Oahu and who was raised at the Waihau Temple right next to Puck's Alley. You know, and you go down University Ave, Puck's Alley, that whole area was fish ponds, and nearby, where the off-ramp is from the freeway onto University Ave, is the place of the Waihau Temple where Kiha a Pi'ilani was raised. He eventually went to Maui, took management of fish ponds with him, built quite a few there, and he built this temple in honor of his father. And I just have to say, I really love this temple because Kiha Pi'ilani is my ancestor as well. So here is a more Mauka view of Pi'ilani Hale, and you can start to see some of the walls that make up the edge of it. And here you can see it's more of a rectangular kind of temple. Here's a close-up. Now, if you can see where the ocean is pounding away at the shoreline there, that's kind of the back side of the temple, and that's the way, there's a pathway from there that'll let you go up onto the temple. And there is a center of the temple. You have to go along the, what looks like the Makai edge, look down. There is one rock sticking out, and Keli'i Raichel told us that Parli Kanakaoli had told him that was the Pico stone. And so you walk backwards from the stone that is jutting out, and then you can observe solstices and equinox from this temple. Here's kind of a close-up of the middle part of the temple, near where the Pico stone is. This is standing on the temple looking east. And if you look in sort of the corner of this picture, you'll see that there's a wall with a corner in it, and then there's another wall with a corner in it. And those notches that you see in the temple are often found on Maui temples and not found anywhere else. Not anywhere else in the world, in fact. We're not quite sure what that's all about, but perhaps it's a way to mark where the sun is rising, and this would be at the winter solstice. Um, I have to ask Kalei Nu'uhiwa about that. I think she knows more about it than I do. So here's another view of the heiau with that wall that's facing east. And here's a view of that central area, kind of from the Mauka side, looking towards Makai. We're not exactly sure what that central area was used for. It might have been the Halimana. Okay, here's a drawing of Pi'ilani Heiau, and come to find out, it is actually a 0° north heiau. So, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? And it was a luakini. All right, let's go to Oahu. Oahu had lots of heiau too, and lots of luakini. This one is probably the most famous. This is called Pu'u o Mahuka heiau, and it has, if you measure that middle area, that wall is 0° north, and this is up on the north shore in Pupukea area, Pu'u o Mahuka. This one is a Waikiki heiau. It was called Papaena'ena. It's no longer there, but, well, it's kind of there. The Dillinghams built their house on top of it, and that turned into a school that's now known as La Pietra. And if you go up and measure that, one wall is 0° north. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. And that was a luakini. It was used for human sacrifice. Notice that the tower, prayer tower, faces north. This one is Kupopolo heiau. It's on the north shore as well in Kawailua. And it has one wall that is 0° north. So a luakini as well. Now please go to the next video that begins with slide number 88. And I'll see you there. We'll have our next adventure with temples. Mahalo.